You worked on both language and vision. What's the connection between the two? What's more, maybe there's a bunch of ways to ask this, but what's more difficult to build from an engineering perspective and evolutionary perspective, the human language system or the human vision system, or the equivalent of in the AI space, language and vision, or is it the best is the multitask idea that you're speaking to, that they need to be deeply integrated?
Yeah, absolutely. The latter, learning both at the same time, I think is a fascinating direction in the future. So you have data sets where there's visual component as well as verbal descriptions, for instance, and that way you can learn a deeper representation, a more useful representation for both. But it's still an interesting question of which one is easier. Eventually, I mean, recognizing objects or even understanding sentences, that's relatively possible. But where the challenges are is to understand the world, like the visual world, the 3D, what are the objects doing and predicting what will happen, the relationships. That's what makes vision difficult. And language, obviously, it's what is being said, what the meaning is. And the meaning doesn't stop at who did what to whom. There are goals and plans and themes, and you eventually have to understand the entire human society and history in order to understand a sentence very much fully. There are plenty of examples of those kinds of short sentences when you bring in all the world knowledge to understand it. And that's the big challenge. Now, we are far from that, but even just bringing in the visual world together with the sentence will give you already a lot deeper understanding of what's happening. And I think that's where we're going very soon. I mean, we've had ImageNet for a long time, and now we have all these text collections. But having both together and then learning a semantic understanding of what is happening, I think that will be the next step in the next few years.
Yeah, you're starting to see that with all the work with transformers, where the community, the AI community, is starting to dip their toe into this idea of having language models that are now doing stuff with images, with vision, and then connecting the two. I mean, right now it's like these little explorations. We're literally dipping the toe in, but like maybe at some point we'll just like dive into the pool and it'll just be all seen as the same thing. I do still wonder what's more fundamental, whether vision is whether we don't think about vision correctly. Maybe the fact, because we're humans and we see things as beautiful and so on, and because we have cameras that take in pixels as a 2D image, that we don't sufficiently think about vision as language. You know, maybe Chomsky is right all along, that vision is fundamental to, that language is fundamental to everything, to even cognition, to even consciousness. Like the base layer is all language, not necessarily like English, but some weird abstract representation, the linguistic representation.
Yeah. Well, earlier we talked about the social structures, and that may be what's underlying the language. And that's the more fundamental part. And then language has been added on top of that.
Language emerges from the social interaction.
Yeah, that's a very good guess. We are visual animals, though. A lot of the brain is dedicated to vision. And also, when we think about various abstract concepts, we usually reduce that to vision and images. And that's, we go to a whiteboard, you draw pictures of very abstract concepts. So we tend to resort to that quite a bit, and that's a fundamental representation. It's probably possible that it predated, language even. I mean, animals, they don't talk, but they certainly do have vision. And language is interesting development in from mastication, from eating. You develop an organ that actually can produce sound and manipulate them. Maybe that was an accident. Maybe that was something that was available and then allowed us to do the communication. Or maybe it was gestures. Sign language could have been the original proto-language. We don't quite know, but the language is more fundamental than the medium in which it's communicated. And I think that it comes from those representations. Now, in current world, they are so strongly integrated, it's really hard to say which one is fundamental. You look at the brain structures and even visual cortex, which is supposed to be very much just vision. Well, if you are thinking of semantic concepts, you're thinking of language, visual cortex lights up. It's still useful, even for language computations. So there are common structures underlying them. So you utilize what you need.
Yeah.
And when you are understanding a scene, you're understanding relationships. Well, that's not so far from understanding relationships between words and concepts. So I think that that's how they are integrated.
Yeah, and there's dreams, and once we close our eyes, there's still a world in there somehow operating, and somehow possibly the visual system somehow integrated into all of it.